Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Caitlin and I upload 3 times a week on this channel. Wednesdays are fashion and lifestyle videos, Fridays are university weeks in my life where I just vlog a week in my life at university, and Sundays are my unsolved Sundays where I discuss some sort of true crime case, usually a disappearance or a murder, anything along those lines. So today I'm back with another unsolved video, and this one is an unsolved case because I'm starting to integrate both unsolved and solved videos into this sort of series. Today we're going to be discussing the deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives, and this case is it's just such a strange case, and I'll go into it obviously, but it's so strange. I found it really baffling while I was reading it, and also really interesting to hear kind of the larger issue behind it, or potentially what a lot of people believe behind it. So I'll go into the case, what happened, and some of the theories at the end. And yeah, we shall just get started. Don Henry, who was 16 at the time of his death, and Kevin Ives was 17. They were best friends in high school and they did everything together, and they were described as being just typical teenage boys. They were known to go out on dates with their girlfriends together at the weekends. They went to the usual hangouts with their friends. They just did typical teenage stuff. On August 23rd, 1987, Kevin and Don met a group of friends in a known kind of hangout area. It was a car park in their town of Bryan, Arkansas. They just hung out with a group of friends. They typically did it wasn't unusual, and it was just like a known hangout spot. At around midnight, the pair of them left to go to Don's house to pick up a .22 rifle. They had plans to go spotlighting, which is a type of kind of night hunting where one of them would lure out the prey with a flashlight while the other would shoot it. Just before they left Don's house after they picked up the rifle, they had a quick conversation with Don's father, and they told him that they would be going hunting down near their train tracks that weren't too far sort of in their town. In the early hours of August 23rd, 1987, a 6,000-ton cargo train was passing through Bryan, Arkansas, when the driver on the tracks noticed 2 bodies lying parallel next to each other across the tracks. He'd assumed they were kids playing pranks or playing chicken or something, so he honked the horn like so many times, like a lot of times, just to try and get their attention, to alert them that the train was coming, as they obviously hadn't heard this massive train was on the tracks. He did eventually pull the emergency stop brake, but because of the weight, it was a 6,000-ton cargo train, the emergency stop didn't take place until another mile afterwards. So unfortunately, when the boys didn't move off the tracks, he ran them over and carried on going for another mile before the emergency stop was effective. So obviously the police were called, and during the investigation they determined that the 2 boys in the track were in fact Kevin and Don. They were lying next to each other flat across the train tracks with Don's rifle next to them. Other workers on the train said that when they'd seen the bodies, neither of them showed any sign of movement despite the horn being honked a whole bunch of times, and they were also partially covered up with a green tarp. So this is where things get even weirder. So the first round of investigation, in terms of like the medical examiner and coroner and things, it determined that the boys had actually between them smoked the equivalent of 20 marijuana joints, and this then induced a deep sleep like state while they were lying across the train tracks. So the official story in the reports went that they'd smoked 20 marijuana joints and then they'd lied on the tracks, covered themselves in a tarp, and just gone into a deep unconsciousness. And because their technical cause of death was by the train running them over, the death was listed as accidental. However, when this official report was released, there was a huge amount of uproar from just the public and also people who knew Kevin and Don, because they said that this scenario that had been put in the official reports was extremely unlikely, not only just unlike those 2 boys that they knew, but also just unlikely and virtually impossible in general. It is virtually impossible for 2 young boys to want to go away and smoke 20 joints between them, to then just choose to lie down active train tracks in the area that they know, so they are very aware that trains still pass through there, and then just cover themselves in a green tarp and go to sleep. It is just very unlikely. So yeah, there was a lot of uproar when that report was released. Families of Kevin and Don fought hard to get more information, or like for them to reopen the case to investigate further, but all they kept getting was just strong resistance from all the authorities. Like, they just didn't seem to want to take part in this case. They didn't seem to want to help them to find out what actually happened to Kevin and Don, despite their families really pushing to find the truth. It wasn't until 5 months after this the families actually managed to convince the authorities to reopen the case and reinvestigate what happened. No autopsy on the boys was conducted, and actually discovered that they'd only smoked about 1 to 3 marijuana joints between them, and that one of them had actually been dead while he was on the train tracks and the other was simply unconscious. A further investigation also found that Don's t-shirt showed signs of stab wounds, and ultimately the cause of death was changed from accidental to probable homicide. The fact that it took that long for them to find the actual cause of death or actual answers is baffling to me, and I'll go into kind of why people think that there was so much resistance, including a lot of their families. They think there was something kind of larger going on here. Investigation gets even weirder here when they discovered that a case had happened just a few years before in 1984 that was virtually identical to the case of Kevin and Don's deaths. In Hodgen, Oklahoma in 1984, 2 men were found lying on train tracks and ultimately were run over by a train. They were found in virtually the same positions, and I'll go into the actual case a little bit later, but it's absolutely just so strange, and it's too much of a similarity to be just a coincidence that these 2 other men not far from here were found and killed in the same way. So there were rumours of a man hovering in the area in the days leading up to the incident and also the day of. He seemed to be wearing military uniform, but apart from that there was no other information, so they couldn't actually identify who this man was and whether they were just rumours. One eyewitness actually came forward and claimed to see that night in a car park a police officer beating 2 young boys before forcing them into a truck and driving off. But with eyewitness testimonies you have to be able to confirm they're actually true, or they could just be speculation or just remembered incorrectly. So one, they don't know if this actual testimony is correct at all, but they also don't know that these 2 boys, if it is correct, is Kevin and Don. There is no reason for them to believe that that was Kevin and Don. Due to the lack of leads and follow-ups in this investigation, it was eventually closed in 1995. So now onto the theories. I have quite a lot on the theories. It's kind of mainly just one big theory, but it's very interesting. I don't have a lot of the information, but I have some websites linked down below that I'll mention that give a lot of information into kind of evidence to support this main theory. So like I said, there are a few theories out there like circulating the internet. If you go on a lot of forums, there's a lot of discussion surrounding this case, because obviously not only the circumstances were so strange, but also the fact that it was completely virtually identical to another case that happened just a few years before. It raises so many questions. So there's a lot of theories. If you want to look at more, then go do your own research, because there's quite a bit, but this is kind of the biggest one with the most evidence to back it up. So this theory surrounds kind of a drug drop and a massive cover-up that goes sort of above people's heads and high up into the government. In 1996, Kevin's mother, whose name was Linda, she released a video that detailed a lot of information and just names and details of a drug cover-up that went quite high up throughout Saline County, which was the county that their city was a part of. So she, and I believe a lot of their family members, believe that there is this drug ring going on in Saline County, and a lot of people are involved in the cover-up and just kind of help to aid keeping this a secret, because it's to do with like money, and yeah, there's a lot of information. So this theory would suggest a reason as to why the families received so much resistance from the authorities as to look further into this case, because it would suggest that there's something being hidden that they're not supposed to know. And if this theory of kind of authority members and people high up in the government are involved in this drug ring, then it would suggest why there was so much resistance as to finding out the actual details of what occurred to these 2 young boys. So in all likelihood, people believe that they perhaps that night at the train tracks witnessed some sort of maybe drug drop or something going on that someone didn't want them to see or tell anyone, and unfortunately were killed and discarded off via train track. So now the case that was very similar that occurred in 1984, just going to mention a little bit about it here because it is found to link in with this theory quite well. So the 2 men that were involved and were killed in this incident in 1984, their names were Billy Don Hainline, who was 21, and Dennis Decker, who was 26. At the time, just like Kevin and Don, their deaths were ruled as an accident, and then a month after the incident, or when their bodies were discovered, a meth lab was discovered just 1.5 miles away from where their bodies were. There was no evidence of foul play involved, so it appeared like a clean sort of hit, like it was a professional murder, because most likely what a lot of people believe is that they witnessed something that night to do with this meth lab, this active meth lab, perhaps kind of like a larger drug ring that they were then killed because someone didn't want them to tell what they'd seen. And many people believe that this is reflected in Don and Kevin's case, and their murders follow along the same lines, that they witnessed something that someone didn't want going public. So I'll leave a link below to Linda Ives, Kevin's mum's website. She has a lot of information on there about the evidence that she and a lot of other people believe to back up this theory, and names and things. So if you want to read, there's a lot of information on there. It's quite a rabbit hole, so if you want to read a little bit further into it, then I'll leave that in the description box. There's also a book called Boys on the Track that was written by Mara Leveritt, and in this book in particular it implicates a lot of people quite high up in the Arkansas government as aiding the cover-up. I believe she was quite a well-known journalist in the area. So if you want to read a little bit again further into this case, and apparently I've read some really good reviews on that book, sorry, I just started reviews on that book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but if you want to research a little bit more into it, then seems to be the best book to read. So yes, that's everything I'm going to discuss today on the murders or deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives. Let me know your thoughts. I just think this drug theory seems the most likely, as there's apparently so much credible evidence to go with it. It doesn't seem, you know, like false or anything, so let me know what you think, whether there's another theory that you perhaps have seen floating online. Yes, leave your thoughts down below, and also any other future cases you want me to discuss in future weeks' videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon for another video. Bye.